You ever had your own child treat you like you're the ugly one in the family? That's how my story begins. And before you judge me, sit with that for a second, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. Lord, what kind of daughter would do that to her mama? Well, keep listening. My name is Marvina Claiborne. I don't know what time it is where you are, morning, evening, maybe you're even lying awake at 3 a.m. because life won't let you sleep. But whatever the hour, you're about to hear a true story that'll make you shake your head. I'm not here to tell no fairy tales. I'm here to tell you how betrayal can come dressed in a tuxedo, smiling in your face, while your own blood sits back and lets it happen. Now, let me take you back to the moment it cut me the deepest. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon when I asked Aria, my only daughter, my pride, my heartbeat, about her wedding. Not in an overbearing way. I had been waiting, anticipating, trying not to crowd her, but I needed to know when to circle the date on my calendar, when to prepare my dress, when to start humming, "Here Comes the Bride." I smiled and asked, "So, baby, when's the big day? When am I supposed to show up and watch you walk down that aisle?" But Aria didn't answer me. That silence on the other end of the phone was heavy, pressing against the walls of my chest. And before I could ask again, that boy, Darius, "Oh," he said, dragging the word out, enjoying it too much. "We already did it." "Already did what?" "The wedding," he said. "We already got married. Last weekend. Only invited good-looking people. You know, a vibe. Good-looking people." He said it so casually, like he was talking about ordering takeout. My throat went dry. My ears started ringing. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged in my chest. It all looked like I was dreaming. Let me take you back before Darius, before Aria's betrayal, before the sting of that pretty crowd comment. To understand why I didn't crumble that day, you need to know where I come from. My roots aren't shallow. They run deep in the red clay of Charlotte, North Carolina, watered with sweat, sharpened with discipline, and forged in the pride of people who refuse to bow. I was born in 1967, the middle child of Nathaniel and Odessa Claiborne. My daddy wasn't a polished man, but he had a mind sharper than any banker in town. He worked construction by day, laying bricks, pouring concrete, raising walls with hands that stayed cracked and calloused no matter how much lotion Mama rubbed on them at night. But when other men unwound with whiskey or a card game, Daddy studied deeds, zoning maps, and foreclosure notices like scripture. My mama, Odessa, was a schoolteacher, steady, strict, with a soft laugh that only slipped out after hard work was done. She ran our house like she ran her classroom. Chores written on a chart, books stacked in neat piles, dinner ready at 6 sharp. Between the two of them, excuses had no place. "Land is freedom," Daddy would say, spreading a cracked county map across our kitchen table. His finger traced plots and streets the way preachers trace verses in a Bible. "You own the land, you own the story. Don't let nobody write yours for you." I didn't know it then, but those words would become my heartbeat. Our house wasn't grand. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch swing that squeaked when the wind pushed it, but it stood on our land. That mattered. At church picnics and barber shops, I'd hear the whispers. The Claibornes, they own their place. Ownership was respect. It was armor. While other families worried about rent hikes or a landlord's sudden notice, we slept easy. Our roof was ours. Mama's lesson was different, but just as sharp. Don't forget, baby girl. Our skin makes the race longer, but the clock don't stop. You work twice as hard with half the margin for error. Cry if you must, but don't you dare stop. She didn't just talk it. I watched her live it. Nights, I'd see her at the kitchen table with swollen ankles, still grading papers by the lamplight. I saw Daddy drag himself in from a 12-hour construction shift, his back bent, his nails black with cement, just to sit down and study auction lists for another chance at a property. They didn't preach perseverance. They embodied it. I was 10 when I first watched Daddy outbid a white man at a foreclosure auction. The man sneered, spat on the ground, and muttered a word I won't repeat. My heart shrank, but Daddy didn't flinch. He tucked the deed under his arm, nodded at the clerk, and walked us out with his head high. That night, over cornbread and beans, he looked me straight in the eye. Marvina, never let their hatred shake your foundation. Cement yourself in what you own, and no wind can uproot you. Those words planted something fierce in me. Control. Control wasn't about lording over people. It was about never being at their mercy. Control was safety, dignity, power. By the time I hit high school, while other girls were chasing boys or learning how to press their hair just right, I was shadowing Daddy at auctions, memorizing interest rates, and learning the difference between a lien and a clear title. While friends dreamed about dorm life and sororities, I dreamed about deeds stacked in filing cabinets, keys heavy in my hand. I didn't have a carefree childhood, but I had a purposeful one, and it carried me into womanhood, because later, when love betrayed me, when men walked out, when doors slammed shut in, my face, I didn't crumble. I knew how to steady myself. I was raised to anchor in discipline, pride, and control. So when Darius looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't pretty enough for his curated little crowd, I didn't fold. The humiliation cut deep, yes, but it didn't kill me. How could it? I'd already been raised in the fire, and what my parents planted in me, the land, the lessons, the pride, those roots wouldn't just keep me standing. They would become my sharpest weapon. When I tell you I built this life with my bare hands, I don't mean swinging hammers or laying bricks like my daddy did. I mean building while the world was stacked against me, while doors slammed in my face, while I held a baby on one hip and a deed file on the other. If chapter 1 was the wound that pushed me toward revenge, this was the foundation I poured, the lonely climb that taught me exactly how much grit I carried. After high school, I got a scholarship to Spelman. I was hungry for it. Not just the books, but the chance to carve out a future bigger than Charlotte's city limits. I majored in business, minored in urban planning, and soaked up every lecture like it was survival training. Atlanta in the late 80s was buzzing, black excellence on billboards, music on every corner, and the real estate market exploding with promise. But promise doesn't pay tuition. I worked nights at a call center, weekends waitressing at a jazz club, and summers interning at a small real estate firm where I was the only black woman in the room. The men at that firm underestimated me. They called me sweetheart while passing me coffee orders, dismissing my questions about cap rates and zoning laws. But I watched, I listened, and I learned more from their arrogance than I ever could from their guidance. I promised myself that one day I wouldn't just sit at the table. I'd own the table. Then came Jarrell. Lord, I thought he was the one. Tall, smooth-talking, with the kind of charm that could sell sand in the desert. He was studying architecture at Morehouse, and together we dreamed up empires. Him designing buildings, me acquiring them. We talked about legacy, about building something black folks could point to with pride. It felt like destiny. Until it wasn't. The night I told him I was pregnant, I thought he'd be thrilled. Instead, he froze. A week later, he packed up for Chicago with a half-hearted apology and a muttered excuse about not being ready. That was the last I saw of him. No diapers, no lullabies, no late-night rocking. Just me and a positive test in my trembling hand and the sound of my future snapping in half. But if you think I crumbled, you don't know me. When Arya was born, I learned the true meaning of exhaustion. I'd nurse her at dawn, drop her at daycare, hustle to the office, and spend nights with textbooks sprawled across my kitchen counter while she gurgled in a bassinet beside me. My classmates partied. I built. My peers dated. I filed paperwork for HUD homes, studied liens, and built relationships with brokers who didn't know how to say no once I put pressure in the right places. By my 30s, I'd launched my own firm, Claiborne Realty Group. I specialized in affordable rentals for families like mine, people who just needed a fair shot. Every deal I closed was a victory over the whispers that a single black mother was too fragile to stand. And then came my dream home. The Victorian in East Point wasn't much to look at when I first walked through it, peeling paint, sagging floors, ivy choking the porch. But I saw past the ruin. I saw high ceilings waiting for chandeliers, a wraparound porch aching for rocking chairs, and enough bedrooms to house a future my parents never got to see. I bought it for pennies, then poured every spare dime into its bones. Nights I sanded banisters while Arya colored on the floor beside me. Mornings I painted walls while she toddled through the halls with her doll stroller. That house became more than property. It was proof that I could be left, abandoned, and still rise higher than anyone expected. By the time Arya was 10, the manor stood proud. Gleaming wood floors, a gourmet kitchen where I perfected recipes, a backyard with a koi pond that shimmered at sunset. It was my sanctuary, my empire, my testament that control was power, and I had seized mine. One night, standing on that porch with Arya curled against my side, I looked out at the land and made a silent vow. My child would never know the terror of eviction notices slapped on a door. She would never beg a landlord for mercy. She would inherit a life built on solid ground, no matter what it cost me. And that vow, carved deep in me, would one day be tested in ways I never saw coming. When Arya came into my life, I thought I understood what motherhood would be. You pour in your lessons, your grit, your fire, and your child rises in the same mold. But I was wrong. Children don't come out as carbon copies. They arrive as blank canvases painted by the world around them. And the world Arya grew up in was nothing like the one that made me. She was born in 1997, just as the internet started creeping into homes. By the time she was in middle school, the world was scrolling, clicking, swiping. While I carried memories of auctions and deeds, she carried selfies, hashtags, and digital filters. At first, I dismissed it as child's play. Let her be, I told myself. But as she grew, I saw how much of her identity was being sculpted not by my lessons, but by the glowing screen she carried everywhere. Don't get me wrong, Arya was smart, sharp like her granddaddy. She excelled in school, winning debate tournaments and bringing home honor roll certificates that I framed in the hallway. But there was a softness in her drive, a hunger for validation that I didn't recognize. Where I pushed through barriers to prove I belonged, she angled her phone for the right lighting to prove she looked the part. I tried to bridge the gap. I sat at the dinner table telling stories of how I shadowed my father at foreclosure auctions, how ownership gave us dignity. She'd nod politely, then slip away to her room, where I'd hear laughter spilling from FaceTime calls with friends. When I reminded her, "Baby, land is freedom," she'd roll her eyes and mutter, "Yeah, Mom, but followers are currency too." That stung. I knew she wasn't wrong, not in her world. By college, brand deals and influencer marketing were turning nobodies into somebodies overnight. Aria understood trends like I understood property values. She could glance at a color scheme, a font, a filter, and tell you if it would catch fire online. She carved out a career in digital marketing, working for tech startups that barely had office space but somehow raised millions in funding. Her world was fast, shiny, aesthetic-driven. Mine was steady, brick and mortar, grounded, and between us, that difference grew into tension. I'd look at her and see the hours I spent bent over banisters, sanding, painting, scraping my knuckles raw just so she could have a home where nothing was borrowed. I wanted her to value that sacrifice. But when I spoke about the manor as a symbol of legacy, she'd shrug and say, "It's nice, Mom, but I'm not sure I'd ever want something so big. Who even lives in Victorian houses anymore?" Those words cut deeper than she realized, because for me, the house wasn't just walls and wood. It was my shield, my testimony, the reason she never had to fear a landlord's knock. But in her world, it was just another backdrop, not Instagram-worthy, not trendy enough. And then there was my protectiveness. I'd worked too hard to let life knock her sideways the way it did me. So yes, I hovered. I asked questions about her friends, her boyfriends, her late-night outings. I insisted on knowing where she was and who she was with. To me, it was love. To her, it was control. One night, when she was 22, she lashed out. "Mom, you don't own me. Just because you own this house, just because you've built everything, doesn't mean you get to build me." I didn't respond right away. The words echoed through the hallways I'd bled for, as if the house itself was wounded by them. In that moment, I realized something painful. All the grit, all the discipline I tried to hand down, she didn't want it the way I did. She wanted freedom, not the kind Daddy preached about, but freedom from my grip, from the weight of my expectations. I let her go, at least outwardly. I told myself every generation bends toward its own world. But inside, I feared what kind of world would catch her. And that's when he arrived. Darius, smooth-talking, camera-ready, all abs and aesthetics. The type of man who knew exactly how to flatter a woman raised on social media metrics. He spoke her language, fitness, beauty, followers, image. Where I preached legacy, he whispered lifestyle. Where I urged patience, he promised quick returns. I didn't see it at first. I wanted to believe she'd find someone worthy. But deep down, I felt the gap widening, and I knew a man like that could wedge himself in and split us apart. And Lord, was I right. The first time I met Darius, I'll admit, he made a good impression. I remember thinking, this boy rehearsed himself in the mirror. He had that polished confidence, the kind you can't buy at Macy's, the kind that comes from knowing you've been looked at and admired 1,000 times. His handshake was firm, his cologne too sharp, and the way he smiled at Aria, like she was a prize he had already claimed, told me everything I needed to know. He called himself a fitness entrepreneur. Back in my day, men had jobs, real jobs. You worked shifts, you built skills, you earned sweat equity. But in his world, being an entrepreneur meant posting thirst traps, shaking up protein powder, and chasing brand sponsorships that paid in free sneakers. His whole resume lived on Instagram. His following, his likes, his comments, that was his currency. To Arya, though, he was golden. He had ambition, she said. He was driven, focused on his future. And I wanted to believe her. Lord knows, as a mother, you pray your child finds someone who'll stand beside them when storms come. But when I looked at Darius, all I saw was a man building himself, not building a family. At first, he was respectful enough. Miss Claiborne, he'd say, flashing those 2 white teeth. He'd offer to carry groceries, pull out chairs, even help me haul mulch into the garden one Saturday. But respect is one of those things. You can't fake it for long. His mask slipped in small, careful ways. It started with the comments. We were at dinner one night, and I reached for a second biscuit. He smiled almost sweetly and said, "Careful now, Miss Claiborne. You know carbs aren't kind." Arya laughed, brushing it off, but I felt that sting. Later, he'd joke about how I should get on his program, or how I'd look great in the gym if I just committed. Always with a smile, always wrapped in charm. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Like my body was a project, not a presence. Like my worth was negotiable, dependent on what size I wore. I tried to bite my tongue. I told myself, don't start battles your daughter isn't ready to see. But deep down, I recognized his kind. My mother used to call them pretty hustlers. Men who use their looks like currency, who sell the illusion of stability but never buy into responsibility. I'd seen them before, back in Charlotte. They were the type that always had a woman paying the bills while they flexed at the barbershop, claiming to be kings. Still, Arya was blinded. She saw his hustle as ambition. She called him disciplined, motivated. He gets up at 5 every morning to train Mom, she said proudly, like it was some sacred ritual. All I could think was, yes, baby, but what is he training for? A man can sculpt muscles all day long, but if he isn't building wisdom, patience, or a foundation, then what does that body carry besides ego? One Sunday, after church, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You've done well, Miss Claiborne," he said, glancing around my manor. "I mean, for someone without the looks, you really built something solid." He grinned like it was a compliment. I froze. That was no slip of the tongue. That was the truth peeking through his polished smile. I wanted to grab him by the collar and remind him this house was standing because I fought for every inch of it, because I sacrificed nights, weekends, even my health to make sure Arya never knew hunger. But I kept my calm. I smiled back the same way a hunter smiles when she spots tracks in the mud. Because now I knew what he was, the pretty hustler. And hustlers don't love, they leverage. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles. Arya was in love, and love makes smart girls blind. I told myself to wait, to watch, to let time peel back his surface. But in my heart, the unease settled like a stone at the bottom of a well. Because I knew, sooner or later, his body would shine brighter to her than his character ever could. And I whispered to myself, a warning and a promise all at once. He was building a body, not a life. The announcement came not with a phone call, not with a dinner, not even with a private word between mother and daughter, but with a picture. Arya posted it on Instagram, her left hand raised, diamond catching the afternoon sun. Darius kissing her cheek while she tilted her head just enough for the light to kiss her best side. The caption read, "He said forever." I said, "Yes. Here's to us, the power couple." I stared at it on my phone, scrolling through the comments that poured in. Fire emojis, heart eyes, hashtags like #FitLove, #BlackExcellence, #ForeverFit. Thousands of strangers celebrating something I hadn't even been told about directly. My daughter's engagement, broadcast to the world before her own mother got a whisper. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the glow of that little screen burn into my eyes. Social media had stolen intimacy. It made love into a product, proposals into campaigns. But I wasn't about to let their showmanship erase me. I called Aria that night. She answered on speakerphone, laughter and clinking glasses in the background. "Oh, Mom, you saw? Isn't it beautiful?" "Yes, baby," I said softly. "But when were you going to tell me?" She hesitated. It all happened so fast. He planned this rooftop dinner, the skyline, champagne. Everyone was recording. I didn't want to ruin the moment with logistics. I knew what she meant was, you don't fit the image. Still, I pushed down the sting. "Congratulations, sweetheart. Marriage is sacred, and I'll make sure you have the wedding of your dreams." That night, in the quiet of my manor, I opened my files. Spreadsheets, deeds, property maps. Numbers have always calmed me when emotions threatened to spill over. Aria and Darius were living in a duplex in West End, decent spot, but barely holding together. Their rent was eating them alive, and I'd heard whispers that the landlord, an old acquaintance, was looking to sell. I made the call the next morning. A holding company, cash offer, no questions. Within a week, the papers were signed. The duplex belonged to me. My plan was simple. On their wedding day, I would gift them the deed. A foundation, a future, something no bank could take away. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Land is freedom. It would be my legacy to Aria. Proof that love didn't just glitter on a ring, it stood on soil. And in my mind, I saw it all so clearly. The manor's backyard transformed. White chairs lined under oak trees, string lights casting a warm glow, tables set with collard greens and cornbread alongside champagne flutes. I'd have a local jazz quartet play as Aria walked down a path lined with magnolias. Her friends could record all they wanted. It would still be real, rooted, not just aesthetic. But the more I dreamed, the more Aria drifted. When I brought up dates, she dodged. "We're still figuring it out, Mom." When I offered to connect her with a Black-owned catering company I'd worked with for years, she replied, "We're leaning towards something more minimal." When I hinted at hosting the ceremony at the manor, she grew quiet. "We want it intimate, curated." That word, curated, I heard it again and again, like she was building an exhibit, not a marriage. Weeks passed, and my calls went unanswered longer. My texts got short replies. "Busy, later, we'll see." Darius was everywhere on her feed. Them at the gym, them on weekend trips, them posing in coordinated outfits like mannequins in love. And me, I was invisible. One evening, she came by the manor to pick up some old things. I pressed her gently. "Sweetheart, what's the holdup? Your father's not here, but I'm still standing. Let me do this for you." She fiddled with her phone, eyes darting everywhere but mine. We don't want it to be too traditional, Mom. We're building something different. Different, That was her polite way of saying I didn't belong in their picture. That night, I stood in my backyard, staring at the empty space where I'd pictured her altar. The wind rustled through the trees, and I thought about all the nights I rocked her to sleep, all the mornings I packed lunches, all the sacrifices layered into the walls of this manor. And now she was slipping from me, hand in hand with a man who saw beauty only in surfaces. Something in my chest tightened, but it wasn't just pain. It was suspicion. If she was pulling away this much, if her answers were this vague, something wasn't right. I felt it deep in my bones, the same way my mother used to say her knees ached when a storm was coming. And I whispered to myself, out there under the magnolias, storm's coming, Marvina. Better get ready. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight poured through the bay windows, casting warm stripes across my hardwood floors. But I felt cold the second I answered. I'd been asking Aria for weeks, gently, when she and Darius planned to set a date. I thought maybe she was nervous, maybe overwhelmed. But when the phone rang, it was Darius's voice that filled my ear, smooth and smug. "Hey, Miss Claiborne," he said, casual as if he were calling to borrow sugar. "So, funny thing, we already got married. Couple days ago. Savannah Courthouse. Quick and easy." I sat very still, gripping the arm of my chair. "You what?" "Yeah," he continued, chuckling like it was all a great joke. "We had a little after-party on the beach. Nothing big, just the good-looking crowd, you know? Kept it chic, no stress, no drama." The words hit like a blade. The good-looking crowd. I didn't need translation. He meant the sculpted, the polished, the filtered, not mothers with soft arms and bellies carved by childbirth, not women who bore scars of life instead of abs of discipline. Certainly not me. My lips moved, but no sound came out. I heard Aria laughing sheepishly in the background, pleading, "Darius, stop," but it was too late. The cut was clean, deep, deliberate. I ended the call without goodbye. For hours, I walked the halls of my manor like a ghost. The high ceilings that once sang with laughter now echoed with silence. I ran my hand along the polished banister, remembering Aria as a girl sliding down it in socks, squealing with joy. I lingered in the kitchen where we baked pies together, where she once licked batter from the spoon while I pretended not to notice. All those years of sacrifice, of working deals while she slept in the back seat, of juggling bottles and ledgers. And for what? To be erased from the picture of her most sacred day? I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my bedroom. The woman staring back at me was full-bodied, her curves wrapped in a patterned dress that had always made her feel regal. But that night, I saw only what Darius saw. Not good-looking, not curated, excluded. And with that reflection came the flood of history. I remembered my Aunt Geneva, barred from a whites-only swimming pool in Charlotte, forced to watch her children swelter outside the gate, while others splashed inside. I remembered my uncle losing his home overnight during the years of redlining, his family scattered to rentals that never felt safe. I remembered the stories of how Black women, strong and capable, were often told they weren't pretty enough, weren't thin enough, weren't enough, no matter how much they carried on their backs. Now here I was, decades later, cut out of my own bloodline celebration for the same twisted standard. History wasn't past. It was living right in my living room. I paced and paced, the house creaking beneath my steps like it was groaning with me. Rage swelled in my chest, sharp and hot, but grief laced through it too. My only child. My Arya. How could she let him speak that way? How could she go along with this charade? I pressed my palms against the cool window glass, staring out at my garden. The magnolias swayed in the summer air, their blossoms full and unapologetic, their beauty undeniable regardless of shape. And something inside me steadied. I could have screamed. I could have driven to Savannah and torn up that courthouse certificate myself. I could have blasted my pain across every platform they worshipped. But no, revenge doesn't need an audience. Revenge, I decided, would be lived. It would be carried out in silence, in strategy, in patience. They had chosen aesthetics over substance. Very well. I would show them what happens when the ground beneath those polished surfaces gives way. I would not shout. I would not beg. I would move like my father once did, quiet but relentless, flipping the board until the game was mine. By midnight, the vow had formed in my chest, ironclad. I whispered it aloud, standing alone in the dim glow of my manor's chandeliers. The game has just begun. The call came exactly 7 days later. I saw his name flash across my screen, Darius, and for a moment I considered letting it ring. But something in me wanted to hear his tone, wanted to taste the shift from smugness to desperation. So I answered, voice steady. Miss Claiborne. He started, but his usual swagger was gone. His words tumbled over each other, rushed, frantic. Listen, we just got served. An eviction notice. The duplex, somebody bought it out from under us. The new owner's kicking us out in 30 days. I leaned back in my chair, letting silence stretch. The only sound was the faint ticking of the mantel clock behind me. He kept talking. This came out of nowhere. Rent was already tight. And with my studio down on clients, we don't have backup like that. Arya's freaking out. We thought maybe you could help. I could almost hear his throat tighten around the word help. Arya's voice broke and then, strained, softer. Mom, please. We didn't see this coming. My lips curved, not in kindness, but in satisfaction. They didn't know the truth yet, that I had moved the pieces myself after their little good-looking crowd celebration. That while they were posing on beaches, I was at a lawyer's office selling the very ground under their feet. I had turned their home into someone else's investment, stripped them of the little stability they thought they had. I pictured them sitting in that duplex, boxes half-packed already, eviction papers spread across the table. I thought of Darius, who had laughed about curating a crowd, now scrambling because the roof over his head was curated right out from under him. Help, I repeated slowly, savoring the word. That's rich. You couldn't help me be at your wedding. You couldn't help me stand as a witness to my only child's vows. But now you want my help. Miss Claiborne wasn't like that. Darius rushed in. His voice cracked at the edges. We wanted it small, aesthetic. It wasn't personal. Arya cut in, her voice trembling. Mom, it was stupid. I know. I should have told you. But please, we don't have anywhere else to go. His parents' place is too small. We can't just... I stopped her cold. You can't just live off filters and likes, Arya. Life comes with bills, notices, hard deadlines. And I warned you. I raised you so you'd never have to beg a landlord. But here you are. The line went quiet except for their breathing, shallow and strained. I could feel them waiting, hoping I'd rush in with a rescue like I always had. But this time, I stayed still. Finally, Darius whispered, almost choking on it. We don't have another option. You got all that space in your manor. Can't we just stay with you? For a little while. Just until we figure it out. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness, I saw the reflection of myself in the mirror after their wedding snub, the woman cut out of her own daughter's life because she wasn't good-looking enough. That wound still burned, raw and open. When I spoke, my voice was ice. You want to live in my house? Crawl back under my roof after casting me aside. No, Darius. No. This is the game you chose. And the game has just begun. Before Arya could answer, before the begging could twist deeper, I ended the call. I sat there in silence, the phone cooling in my palm, a strange calm washing over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one scrambling to hold family together. No, I was the one holding the cards. And they would learn day by day, eviction notice by eviction notice, what it meant to underestimate me. Anyways, I allowed them in just to teach them their next lesson. The first strike wasn't loud. It never needed to be. It was in the quiet clatter of silverware, the smells that drifted down the hallway, the way I plated their meals against mine. I cooked every night like my table was the center of a world they couldn't touch. Roasted lamb with rosemary sprigs, honey-glazed carrots, cornbread soft enough to fall apart on your tongue. I set out crystal glasses, polish forks, folded linen napkins into perfect triangles. And then I placed their plates in front of them. Grilled chicken, steamed broccoli, half a scoop of rice measured neat like a child's portion. Darius's plate looked like something straight off one of his abs are made in the kitchen rants. I could almost hear his old voice from those glossy videos, mocking women like me for not having discipline, swearing his shredded torso was proof of character. I smiled sweet when I slid the plate across. Got to keep you lean, right? Isn't that what you always preach? His fork hit the plate harder than it needed to. The difference in meals wasn't subtle. My table stretched like a line between us. Abundance on one end, austerity on the other. Arya picked at her food, her eyes darting between my full spread and her little pile. She whispered once, "Mama, can we just—" But I cut her off with a glance. "This is my house," I said, not raising my voice. "And in my house, we eat according to what we deserve." When clients came, the game sharpened. I hosted dinners for real estate investors, pastors, women from the neighborhood association. The dining room filled with laughter, glasses clinking, the smell of gumbo heavy in the air. I made sure the head seats were filled by me, by guests, by anyone but them. Arya and Darius were placed at the end of the table, where the light didn't quite reach, close enough to hear every deal, every story of success, but too far to participate. Sometimes Darius tried to chime in, talking about discipline, about branding, about the hustle, but my guests barely looked his way. And when I interrupted with, "Darius and Arya are still finding their footing," the words dropped like a lid, shutting the moment down. I watched his jaw flex, his hand curl around his fork like he wanted to snap it. But he didn't, because in my house, his words carried no weight. At night, I pass their room and hear them fighting through the thin walls. Arya crying softly, Darius's voice sharp and clipped, both of them unraveling. I'd pause for a second, listening, then move on to my own room, sliding between satin sheets, belly full, mind calmer than it had been in years. It was the kind of justice you don't shout about, the kind you savor in silence. One night after dinner, Arya slipped into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. Her face was blotchy, mascara smudged, her whole body shaking. "Mama, I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching the counter like it was the only thing holding her up. "I shouldn't have let him talk about you like that. I shouldn't have." Her voice broke, and the sobs tumbled out. "I should have never let that wedding happen without you." Her apology should have broken me. A younger version of me might have pulled her close, kissed her hair, whispered that everything was fine. But that version of me had been buried in the cold silence of my empty manor, pacing floors the night she cut me out. So I turned back to the dishes. The warm water ran over my hands, the sponge circling slow. I didn't even look at her when I said, "Don't waste my time with sorry. Baby, sorry doesn't change a damn thing." Her sob hit the air like glass shattering. She waited, maybe hoping I'd soften, but I didn't. I kept scrubbing until she left, her footsteps dragging down the hall. Only then did I let myself smile. Small, cold, satisfied. Because apologies meant nothing now. Only actions counted. And I wasn't done teaching them what that meant. I'll tell you something about shame. It never knocks on the front door. It seeps in through the windows, rides on whispers, and lingers in the pews where everybody pretends to be holy. I knew Darius and Arya thought they could bury their little wedding stunt. They thought what happened on that beach would stay on that beach. But in our world, nothing stays buried when the church ladies get a hold of it. It started simple. I didn't need to confront them outright. I just let the story breathe. A few carefully placed comments after Sunday service, a soft sigh in the fellowship hall, a knowing glance when someone asked about the ceremony. "Oh, I wouldn't know," I'd say, folding my church bulletin. I wasn't considered part of the good-looking crowd. I never raised my voice, never sounded bitter, just disappointed, almost confused. And that tone was more powerful than any outburst could have been. By the following week, the whispers were floating faster than the choir's soprano line. The congregation loved a parable, and my situation became one. "Did you hear Marvina's own daughter married without her mama there? They said it was about looks. Imagine dismissing your own blood like that." The story traveled from pew to pew, from Bible study circles to cookouts. Nobody accused them to their face, but the side eyes grew sharper every time Arya walked into a room. Darius felt it first. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened when Deacon Harris slapped his back a little too hard and said, "Son, you ought to treat your elders better." Or when Sister Ruth smiled too sweetly, asking, "So when do we get to see those wedding photos? You know, the ones with the good-looking folks." The sarcasm dripped like honey, and he couldn't wipe it off. Arya, though, tried to hold her ground. She marched into the sanctuary with her head high, her stilettos clicking like she owned the aisles. She wrapped her arm around Darius and forced smiles, posting filtered selfies after service to prove nothing was wrong. But I could see it in her eyes. The little girl who once painted murals in my craft room couldn't bear the way people were looking at her now. Not with admiration, but with judgment. At home, tension brewed, louder than the cicadas, at dusk. I'd catch snippets when their door cracked, Darius hissing, "Your mama's turning people against us." Arya snapping back, "You're paranoid, they're just jealous." But paranoia doesn't need evidence. It feeds on suspicion. And Darius's pride couldn't stomach the idea of being the butt of quiet jokes. He started skipping church altogether, claiming he needed to work Sundays. leaving Arya to face the whispers alone. I didn't have to lift a finger. The community did the work for me. See, when you're raised in the Black South, your reputation isn't just yours, it's your currency. It decides who does business with you, who invites you over, who trusts you. And I was slowly draining theirs dry, making every room feel hostile, every handshake stiff. One Wednesday night after Bible study, Arya lingered by my car as I slid into the driver's seat. Her voice cracked, low and urgent. "Mama, why are you letting them say these things? You could shut it down if you wanted to." I looked at her carefully. "The way you study a picture you once knew by heart but no longer recognize. Why would I shut down the truth? You left me out. That was your choice. Choices come with echoes." Her lip trembled, but pride wouldn't let her beg. "This isn't fair. You're punishing me." I leaned closer, my words soft enough to make her lean in. "Fair? Life was never fair. But I'll tell you this. Inheritance is about trust. And right now, daughter, you've made it clear I can't trust you." Her eyes widened like I'd slapped her. She knew what I meant. The house, the properties, the security I'd been building for her since before she was born. I didn't need to threaten, I only needed to hint. A seed of doubt was enough to grow into a forest of fear. She pulled back, silent, and I drove off, leaving her in the parking lot lit by the yellow glow of the church lamps. Behind me, I saw her figure shrinking in the rearview mirror, stiff and shaking. For years, I raised Arya to believe she'd never need to beg a landlord, never need to wonder where her next roof would come from. But that night, I let her taste what it felt like to have all of it teeter on the edge of uncertainty, and that, my friends, was just the beginning of how I made her question everything she thought she had. If reputation is currency, then Darius was going bankrupt, and I was the silent banker pulling strings behind the curtain. His fitness studio had always been more flash than substance. Instagram reels, curated playlists, clients chasing aesthetics instead of discipline. But I knew how fragile businesses like his were. All it took was a few nudges for the cracks to show. First came the rent. What Darius never knew was that the building his studio sat in had changed hands months ago. The anonymous LLC listed on the deed, mine, a shell company I set up years ago for side acquisitions. It had been sitting quietly until I decided to put it to use. The new management letter went out. Lease terms adjusted, rent raised by 20%, no exceptions. His overhead ballooned overnight. Then came the clients. A phone call here, a whisper there. I had connections, corporate wellness coordinators who booked group packages, sorority women who wanted trainers for events, even church folks who had flirted with memberships. I didn't tell them to cancel. I just made sure they questioned his professionalism. Isn't he the one who humiliated his own mother-in-law? I'd say lightly, as though gossiping. Seeds of doubt are cheap, but they grow fast. Within weeks, half his regulars were gone. Darius wore his failure like a stain he couldn't scrub off. He strutted less, shoulders hunched more. His once bulletproof Instagram feed grew quieter. Fewer posts, fewer comments, fewer likes. His glow dimmed. And Arya noticed. I saw the change in her during late-night kitchen talks, when she'd wander in while I sipped tea at the counter. She'd stand in her robe, scrolling through her phone, trying to piece together her husband's unraveling. "Mama," she whispered one night, "I don't get it. He used to be booked solid. Now he says clients are ghosting. Maybe it's the algorithm." I looked at her, calm and steady. Sweetheart, algorithms don't pay bills. And arrogance doesn't keep clients. Did you ever notice how he talks down to people, including you? She stiffened at that, defensive at first, but I saw the hesitation flicker in her eyes. Doubt had slipped in. Over the next few weeks, small arguments started to echo through the thin walls of the back room. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. Their silence at breakfast was loud enough. Arya's eyes red from crying. Darius's jaw clenched as if chewing on rage. One afternoon, I passed by the laundry room where Arya stood folding clothes, her phone buzzing with a text. She glanced up at me, face drawn. He spent $300 on supplements this week. $300, Mama, when we're barely keeping up. I tilted my head, folding a towel. That's not a husband, baby, that's a liability. A man who can't carry his own weight will drag you under trying. I didn't need to say more. She absorbed it like a sponge. By the end of the month, cracks became fractures. Darius was snapping more often, over money, over Arya's long hours, over his own bruised ego. I let them play out, never intervening, always watching. The breaking point came on a Friday evening in my kitchen. I had set out a spread for myself, roasted salmon, sautéed greens, cornbread hot from the oven. They shuffled in late, plates clinking from the diet meals I left for them. Arya, exhausted, asked gently, Darius, maybe you should think about pivoting like training online, or... That was when his temper flared. He slammed his fork on the counter, eyes flashing. Pivot? You sound just like her. He jerked his chin toward me. Always judging, always acting like I'm not enough. I built myself from nothing, and now I gotta answer to you, to her. Arya froze, tears pooling. I stayed quiet, sipping my tea, letting the moment stretch. Silence can be the sharpest knife. When he stormed out, muttering under his breath, Arya sat down heavily at the table, face in her hands. She didn't see the small smile that tugged at my lips, because in that moment, I knew my work was taking root. The strong couple facade was crumbling, and soon there'd be nothing left but rubble. And rubble I could mold however I wanted. Some truths deserve to be dropped like a hammer, sudden, heavy, leaving dents that can't be smoothed. I waited until the right night, when the air in the manor was thick with unspoken arguments, and Darius's pride hung by a thread. Timing is everything in war, and revenge is nothing if not a long, patient campaign. It was a Sunday evening, quiet after service. I had made oxtails, rice and peas, collard greens with smoked turkey, the kind of meal that clings to your bones. I watched them shuffle to the table, tired and beaten down from another week of rent notices, studio losses, and silent tension. Arya looked pale. Her eyes ringed with shadows. Darius looked like a man choking on his own bitterness. Perfect. I poured sweet tea into glasses, set them down carefully, and then leaned against the counter, folding my arms. Do y'all know who your landlord was? I asked, my voice smooth, calm, like I was just making conversation. Darius squinted at me, suspicion rising. What do you mean? I tilted my head, letting the silence draw out. Then I said it plain. It was me. I own that duplex, and I sold it. That eviction notice that landed on your doorstep, that was my doing. The words sank heavy. Arya's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mama, what? You were the landlord all along. Her voice cracked on the word Mama, like she couldn't reconcile the woman who raised her with the woman who had orchestrated her downfall. Darius, though, was a different story. His face flushed deep red, jaw twitching as he processed the humiliation. His pride had been peeled like old wallpaper, layer by layer, and now he saw the bare wall underneath. I had been in control the whole time. You mean to tell me, he spat, you had us living under your thumb, playing games with us like we're tenants? I didn't flinch. I walked to the head of the table, planted my hands firmly, and leaned forward. My voice dropped lower, steadier, with the weight of generations behind it. This isn't a game, Darius. This is legacy. This empire was built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. My father flipped houses when black men weren't even allowed in most neighborhoods. My mother stretched paychecks as a teacher, so we never had to beg. I raised Arya alone when her daddy vanished, working deals with one hand while rocking her to sleep with the other. Every inch of this manor, every deed with my name on it, was carved out of blood, sweat, and dignity. I paused, letting their stunned silence sit in the air, my eyes locked on theirs. And you, I pointed to Darius, my finger sharp as a blade. You wanted to reduce me to an aesthetic, a look, to tell me I wasn't good looking enough to stand at my own daughter's wedding after all I built, after all I gave. Arya's lip trembled. Mama, we thought we were doing something modern, something different. It wasn't supposed to. Wasn't supposed to what? I cut in, my voice tightening. Erase me? Humiliate me? Make me small in the very story I made possible? Child, you think aesthetics put a roof over your head. You think trends pay bills? Beauty fades. Muscles fade. But property, legacy, discipline, those endure. Darius shifted in his chair, fists clenched, but he said nothing. His silence wasn't respect. It was fury bottled up, the kind of rage men choke on when they realize they've been beaten at their own game. I straightened, smoothed my dress, and spoke with finality. I don't owe either of you a damn thing. If you're here, it's because I allow it. Every step you take in this house is because I permit it. Don't you ever forget who built the ground you're standing on. The clock on the wall ticked, steady and cold. Arya's eyes brimmed but didn't spill. Darius's chest heaved, but not a sound left his lips. For once, their performances, their curated smiles, their filtered versions of reality, none of it could save them. I had stripped them down to silence, and silence, to me, was sweeter than any apology. It started with little cracks in their voices, hesitations where arrogance used to live. By now the shine of their so-called power couple image had dulled to dust. Their friends had stopped visiting, Darius's clients had evaporated, and even their filtered smiles on social media drew whispers instead of likes. One night it broke. The Manor's kitchen was warm with the smell of cornbread rising in the oven. I stood at the sink rinsing collard greens when I heard the shuffle of feet behind me. It wasn't the sharp, hurried steps of two young people full of plans. It was dragging, heavy, uncertain. Mama, Arya's voice cracked. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, her lashes wet, her lips trembling. Darius followed behind, shoulders sagging, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. I turned off the faucet and faced them. What is it now? Arya burst before he could. We can't do this anymore. The fighting, the shame. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Mama, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Her words tumbled out like she'd been holding them back for months. I thought love would fix everything. I thought if I stood by my husband, we'd build our own life. But all I've done is lose pieces of myself. Her voice broke on that last line, and she covered her face with her hands. Darius stepped forward, trying to mask desperation with that old influencer confidence. Look, Marvina, we messed up, all right? Maybe we got caught up in the image, the wedding, the lifestyle. But families fight and heal. Let's move past this. Give us a chance to rebuild. Together. His words were sugar-coated poison, smooth but hollow. I caught the flicker in his eye. He wasn't apologizing. He was negotiating. Even now, even beaten down, he thought he could charm his way into my good graces, that I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Darius, stop performing. You're not talking to a client or a follower. You're talking to the woman who raised the daughter you think you can control. That script of yours doesn't work in this house. His jaw tightened. The mask slipped just for a second, and I saw the resentment simmer beneath. He had no new moves left. Arya dropped to her knees on the tile, something I never imagined I'd witness. Her sobs echoed in the room, raw and childlike. Mama, I'm sorry. I should have listened. I should have trusted you. I thought you just didn't understand me, but you understood more than I did. Please don't give up on me. Don't let me drown in this. The sight tore at me, not because I wanted her broken, but because I had always known it would come to this. Her seeing the truth with her own eyes. I bent down slowly, not to lift her, not yet, but to look her square in the face. You thought legacy was a cage, baby. You thought my rules were chains. But those rules kept you clothed, fed, safe. They kept a roof over your head when your daddy was gone. And it was just us against the world. And when this man, I cut my eyes at Darius, told you my weight, my body, my looks disqualified me from your happiness, you let that poison sink in. Her sobs grew softer, her eyes wide, drinking in every word. Now, I continued, my voice steady, that survival isn't pretty. It's not about aesthetics or applause. It's about grit, about who will still be standing when everyone else folds. And you, I touched her cheek gently. You come from me. You got that same fire in you. Don't ever forget it. Darius shifted uncomfortably. So what now, huh? You gonna hold this over us forever? Make us beg at your feet like this? I turned my gaze on him, sharp as a blade. No, Darius, you chose to crawl here yourself. And begging doesn't buy back dignity. You should know that better than anyone. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your theatrics. I want you to understand you will never, ever own this narrative. Not while I'm breathing. His mouth opened, but no words came. For once, he had no caption, no comeback. Arya clutched my hand with both of hers, whispering through the tears, Mama, please don't give up on me. The words cut deeper than any insult ever had, because revenge wasn't meant to destroy her. It was meant to wake her. And in that moment, for the first time since the betrayal, I saw the daughter I raised staring back at me. And that was more powerful than any victory over Darius. There's a silence that falls after battle, a hush so complete it feels like the earth itself is catching its breath. That's the silence that filled my manor the night everything came full circle. No more shouting, no more excuses, no more performances. Just me, my daughter. Humbled, and the man who thought he could erase me reduced to nothing but a shadow in my own house. I thought back to Charlotte, to my father Nathaniel's voice carrying through the humid evenings, his hands rough from the land. A Claiborne doesn't just live on the earth. He'd say, we hold it, we work it, and when people forget who we are, we remind them. My mother Odessa with her sharp tongue and sharper prayers, telling me over and over that beauty fades, applause dies down, but respect stays if you demand it. That was the soil I was raised in, and I carried those lessons like bricks in my chest all these years through betrayal, through single motherhood, through building deeds while rocking a crib. Now I saw the fruits of it. Not in money, not in marble floors, but in the look on Darius's face when he realized he was powerless in my world. Arya sat at the edge of the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from tears, her voice small. She looked like she was waiting for a verdict, and in a way she was. I had to decide what came next. Would I forgive her outright, wrap her back into the safety of my arms like nothing had happened, or would I let her sit in that discomfort longer, let her understand that love isn't free? When trust is broken, I studied her. She wasn't a child anymore, but for the first time in years, she wasn't hiding behind trends or a man's shadow. She looked raw, unshielded, and maybe, just maybe, ready to learn what it really meant to carry the Claiborne name. I don't raise quitters, I said softly, and I don't raise followers. You've been both these past years, but the blood in you is stronger than that. The question is, are you ready to reclaim it? Her lips trembled, but she nodded, not with the quick eagerness of someone saying what I wanted to hear, but with the slow weight of a woman who finally understood the stakes. Darius scoffed, breaking the fragile air. So what? This is the big lesson. Humiliate us, make us beg, then stand on a soapbox like some prophet. I turned to him with a calm that burned hotter than rage. No, Darius, this isn't about humiliation. It's about truth. You thought you could reduce me to a body, to an aesthetic, to an obstacle in your perfect picture. You thought legacy could be skipped over like a filter on a phone. But look at you now, standing in a house you don't own, depending on a woman you mocked, stripped of every illusion of control. That's not my doing. That's your own reflection staring back at you. He had nothing left to give. No audience, no applause, no control. Just silence. And in that silence, I knew I had taken everything that mattered to him. As for Arya, forgiveness wasn't going to be instant. Wounds don't close overnight. But she was my daughter, my only child, and I had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to let her drown in her own mistakes. She would stay close, not out of pity, but out of discipline. She would earn her way back into my trust, brick by brick, the same way I built everything that had ever carried her. Later that night, when the house was finally quiet, I stood in front of the old mirror in my room. My reflection stared back, full, round, strong. The same body they mocked, the same body that had carried a child, worked land, signed deeds, survived humiliation, and still stood tall. I smiled at that reflection because I finally understood. Revenge wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about standing so firmly in who you are that no one can deny you again. And so I leave you with this. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about reminding them who you really are. And I am Marvina Claiborne,